What a week. I'm Larry Elder. We got a country to say. Welcome to the show brought to you by my friends at YRefi. Invest in America's future like I do. Like I said, what a week. We have Bloodbathgate. We have a gun control advocate who wants to ban assault weapons, except she couldn't define assault weapons. More Trump derangement. My interview with the editorial board of the newspaper that called me the black face of white supremacy, and just how much does the Biden administration despise Elon Musk? All that and more.
But now I need you. Just once more, I need you. You must come back to me, Melitza.
Bloodbathgate. I really hope Pfizer is working on a vaccine for Trump derangement syndrome. Listen to what the former president said about the impending bloodbath of the American automotive industry if Biden remains in office. Here's exactly what Trump said at the Dayton, Ohio rally.
Mexico has taken, over a period of 30 years, 34% of the automobile manufacturing business in our country. Think of it. Went to Mexico. China now is building a couple of massive plants where they're going to build the cars in Mexico and they think that they're going to sell those cars into the United States with no tax at the border. Let me tell you something to China. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us. Now, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, that's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars.
Okay, you heard it. Here's what the man said. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, you're not going to hire Americans and you're going to sell the cars to us? No. We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line. And you're not going to be able to sell those cars if I get elected. Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That will be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars. They're building massive factories. End of quote.
We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line. And you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, that's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath.
A word about YRefi. What makes YRefi so different from other investments, you ask? Let's quickly break it down. YRefi offers a secured collateralized portfolio with a strong fixed rate of return, up to 10.25%. There is no attack on your principal. If you ever need your money back, you can get it back. You're in control. You can let your investment compound daily or take income, whatever you choose. There are absolutely no fees, and an investment in YRefi is an investment in America's future. Simply call 888-YRefi-24. That's 888-YRefi-24. And when you call, you will not get a sales pitch. Just the info you need to see if YRefi is a better investment option for you. Or log on to investyrrefi.com. That's invest, the letter Y, then REFY.com. And make sure to tell them Larry Elder sent you. Now, right on cue, the Democrats and the media twisted what Trump said about the auto industry into, if you don't elect me, I will unleash a bloodbath. Hide the women and children.
I said, oh, Lord Jesus, it's a fire. Then I ran out. I didn't grab no shoes or nothing, Jesus. I ran for my life. And then the smoke got me. I got bronchitis. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Now, there is no dearth of controversies attributed to former President Donald Trump. In the latest, Trump is speaking of a bloodbath in the country if he is not elected.
Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it.
Race for the White House and former President Trump's campaign now on the defensive after his fiery rhetoric at a rally in Dayton, Ohio on Saturday night. Trump warning while discussing the economy that there would be a, quote, bloodbath if he is not reelected in November.
He's even predicting a bloodbath. What does that mean? He's going to exact a bloodbath? There's something wrong here.
Now, Democrats and the media would never, ever use the term bloodbath, would they?
But as Politico.com reports tonight on the, quote, bloodbath at the RNC, headlines calling it a, quote, bloodbath.
Be a bloodbath. Not only is it going to be a bloodbath, but after they leave New Hampshire, it's a bloodbath on her home turf. That's really tough. Trump has left a lot of corpses in his wake. I mean, we can count the bodies
as part of the, quote, MAGA drive to take over Maricopa County. And the headline refers to it as an impending bloodbath.
Columnist Charles Blow has a new piece for the New York Times entitled A Biden Bloodbath.
2018 midterms, you can bet that they 100% are fearing a slaughter. In fact, the word bloodbath and massacre come up frequently.
The Republican Party will be destroyed. It's going to be a bloodbath.
There's going to be a bloodbath one way or the other.
Bloodbath for Bernie Sanders.
It's been a bloodbath. They're shaping up to be a bloodbath.
Head off a bloodbath in next year's crucial midterm.
Off-year elections are often a bloodbath.
This week's bloodbath for Democrats.
a bloodbath at the ballot box.
Talk about a bloodbath.
It's a bloodbath. I have to talk about you. And
It's going to be a bloodbath all day long.
Is in for a bloodbath.
Donald Trump bloodbath.
Be a bloodbath.
Predicted to be a bloodbath.
may not be the bloodbath.
It would be a bloodbath.
More of a bloodbath.
It's going to be a bloodbath in November.
A bloodbath on Wall Street.
There's going to be a bloodbath
in Alabama into a bloodbath.
Obviously, there was a bloodbath.
It was a bloodbath. We're down 800 points.
This bloodbath at Department of Homeland Security.
And it's a bloodbath today.
There was going to be this bloodbath.
Election bloodbath.
It could be a bloodbath for them.
Bloodbath, possibly.
Bloodbath that went through with the Attorney General.
Bloodbath 99 days out.
The bloodbath is going to look like
Presided over a bloodbath in the diplomatic corps.
Absolute, in my opinion, bloodbath. The Democrats are
calling it ticket sales turned into a bloodbath.
Ticket sales for singer Taylor Swift's latest tour.
It's safe to say the fans had a bloodbath for the company after the fiasco.
Really?
The president was clearly talking about the impact of imports devastating the American automotive industry.
Was that clear to you? Because it was a little muddled.
It was.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Now, what exactly do gun controllers mean when they say they want to ban assault weapons?
When you were a partner in your law firm, you volunteered to write a brief on behalf of the Brady Center. You wrote the brief, and this is what you said. You volunteered for this. You weren't being paid. Is that right?
This was a pro bono case that one of my partners brought in, yes.
You said, quote, assault weapons may be banned because they're extraordinarily dangerous and are not appropriate for legitimate self-defense purposes, close quote. Tell me what you meant by assault weapons.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Just to clarify there, I was local counsel. Our Supreme.
Yeah, but you wrote the brief. Tell me what you meant by assault weapons.
Senator Kennedy, actually, I did not write the brief. The brief was written by.
You signed the brief, though, didn't you?
Correct. I signed the brief.
You sign a brief, you're testifying to the court that everything in it is true, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So
they're your words in terms of the court, right?
Well, you're correct, Senator Kennedy. Okay. I would never sign.
Tell me what you meant by assault weapons.
So I am not a gun expert, and at the time, that brief I think was about 10 years.
You were giving the court advice about, say, ban assault weapons. What is? You told the court you were an expert. Just tell me what you wanted to ban.
Senator, sitting here today, as I said, I did not write that brief. I was local counsel.
Sign the brief.
I understand. At the time,
tell me what you wanted to ban. That's all I want to know, Judge.
I don't remember the exact definition of assault weapons in the ordinance that was at issue.
So you submitted a brief to an appellate brief. You signed it, and you don't know what. And you said abolish assault weapons, and you don't know what you wanted them to abolish.
Senator, at the time that I signed the brief, I read the brief. because our Supreme Court required an Illinois bar member to sign the brief. I was not responsible for researching the content.
You were responsible for the brief.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sitting here today, I do not remember the characteristics of that were cited in the ordinance for the assault weapons ban. It's not an area of practice that I have specialized in. I'm sure 10 years ago, I could have answered your question.
Now, when you were a partner in your law firm, you volunteered to submit a brief to ban assault weapons. What exactly is an assault weapon in your view? Can you define it?
Excuse me. May I go to the bathroom first?
Of course you may.
Thank you.
Okay, now let's try this again. This time with Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas.
Mr. Secretary, do you agree with the president that we should ban the private ownership of assault weapons in America?
Senator, I do.
What is an assault weapon?
It is, for example, an AK-47.
Can you give me a definition other than just pointing to a specific weapon? Would there be other weapons besides an AK-47 you would ban?
There very well are. And I remember when I was a federal prosecutor in the Central District of California from September 25th, 1989 to, I believe it was April 2001.
And I thank you for your service, but if you could answer my question.
The vast majority of law enforcement officers, leaders with whom I worked were greatly in support of the assault weapons ban.
Mr. Chairman, you know why we get so frustrated with you? Because you won't give straight answers.
I think I just did.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Do you have a definition of an assault weapon?
I am confident there is a technical definition of what is an assault weapon, and it was assuredly used in the context of the statute that previously existed banning assault weapons.
Let's just try this again, shall we? Surely the director of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency knows the definition of assault weapons, right?
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
I've seen it read that in 2018, when you ran for Attorney General, that you said that all assault weapons should be banned. Is that a fair statement?
I certainly said that I was in that political campaign, which is far different from where I am now. Although the administration's position is that there should be an assault weapons ban, to be clear. But I think what I said was that there should be an assault weapons ban. I think it would have been up to the Ohio legislature to try and determine, and it's hard work to determine what things are and are not covered, how you define those terms. That would have been my view. And as with any legislative body, they get to make those determinations.
But if you agreed with that, as a gun owner of many different types and a 20-year military veteran, I have some expertise in weaponry and self-defense weapons. What could you, in 15 seconds, would you define an assault weapon for me?
So
if you go past 15 seconds, I'll just interrupt you.
No, so I'll go shorter than that, because I honestly do think if Congress wishes to take that up, I think Congress would have to do the work, but we would be there to provide technical assistance.
I can't take much more of this. Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit amphetamines.
Unlike you, I'm not a firearms expert to the same extent as you may be, but we have people at ATF who can talk about velocity of firearms, what damage different kinds of firearms cause, so that whatever determination you chose to make would be an informed one.
Did you go to Harvard Law School?
I might have to plead guilty.
All right.
I'm sorry.
In other words...
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition? No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
not in
Okay.
this context.
So you
I'm not a
believe the meaning
biologist.
So the director of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency cannot define what an assault weapon is? The problem is Democrats want to ban assault weapons, but have no idea how to define an assault weapon or a weapon of war. What they apparently mean are fully automatic weapons, which are already severely restricted in the country. Instead, they seek to ban firearms like the popular AR-15, which is not a fully automatic weapon. It is a semi-automatic weapon, and they apparently do not understand the distinction.
So I served in Operation Iraqi Freedom. I served in the Army, and there's a lot of talk in Washington about weapons of war. And my purpose of yielding to one of my colleagues who may have served was to ask them a specific question of what type of firearm were you issued when you were deployed. And the answer to that question is a true, what would be defined as a weapon actually used in war, has a selector switch on it for fully automatic, 3-round burst, and semi-automatic. So when I deployed in 2006 in Operation Iraqi Freedom, we were issued M4s in the United States Army. Those M4s had a selector switch on them. Those selector switch allow you to have fully automatic, 3-round burst, or semi-automatic. Those firearms are not allowed for purchase in the United States today. So this cascading of weapons of war, what I was issued, and again, I would ask any person that served in a deployed environment, you are issued weapons that allow for fully automatic and 3-round burst. That is not available for purchase in the United States, and that is not what the Democrats are attempting to ban today, because that's already banned. What we're talking about is a semi-automatic rifle that only is used in a semi-automatic form. So behind me is a typical AR platform weapon, and you can't see it because it's on this side, not the other side, that has a selector switch on it. That selector switch is only for fire or not fire, safe or not safe, and that is for a semi-automatic operation of the weapon, which means every time I depress the trigger, a round comes out of the firearm. All right, next slide, and just move it over. This is the most popular handgun in the United States that was purchased is a Glock 19. It functions in exactly the same way as this rifle. It's a semi-automatic, just like that's a semi-automatic. The rifles not available for purchase don't have a selector switch for 3-round bursts or fully auto. This is a semi-automatic handgun. As quick as I depress the trigger of this Glock 19, a round comes out of the chamber. The functionality between that weapon and this weapon are exactly identical. There is no difference. So you're banning a class of weapons that you don't like the look of, not because of functionality, not because of how fast a round comes out of the weapon, just because you don't like the way that they look, because they function exactly the same.
Any questions?
Excuse me. May I go to the bathroom first?
By the way, I am a co-founder of Old Glory Bank. Get a free copy of my new book, As Goes California, My Mission to Rescue the Golden State and Save a Nation. Open an account in Old Glory Bank, and when you get your debit card in the mail, activate it, and you will get a free copy of my new book, As Goes California. Just go to oldglorybank.com. That's oldglorybank.com. Now on to Trump derangement syndrome.
Donald J. Trump is now President of the United States. President Obama is the ex-president. And Mr. Trump, for the moment, steps away for the inaugural address. What a great honor to be able to introduce for the first time ever anywhere the 45th President of the United States of America, Donald. Tap on the shoulder. You adjust the microphone as you talk, man. For their gracious aid.
I am so sorry to my world. I am so sorry to my world. This is not what we want.
We will face challenges.
There's so much potential
but we will get the job done.
For beauty and for devastation. In this one moment, it's just almost incomprehensible that they can exist right now.
Ain't nobody got time for that. Trump derangement syndrome. How did we get to the point where half the country believed that Donald Trump engaged in insurrection on January 6th, when the man has never been charged with, let alone convicted of, insurrection? How did we get to the point where half the country believes that Donald Trump mocked a disabled reporter when he did no such thing? How did we get to the point where half the country believes that Donald Trump said there were some good Nazis and bad Nazis on both sides regarding Charlottesville, when the man was talking about the fact that there are good and bad people on both sides of the issue about whether there should be a Confederate monument in the public square.
Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath, and it's going to be a bloodbath for the country.
Jews will not replace us!
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Are you willing to condemn white supremacists and militia groups?
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
Please rise for the horribly and unfairly treated January 6th hostages.
There'll be a lot of pardons and commutations of January 6th defendants.
Yes, absolutely. Tell your supporters now, no matter what, no violence. And it's going to be a bloodbath.
How do we get to the point where people's hatred of Donald Trump prevents them from using reason and logic?
People have talked about a miracle. I'm hearing about a nightmare. It's hard to be a parent tonight for a lot of us. You tell your kids, don't be a bully. You tell your kids, don't be a bigot. You tell your kids, do your homework and be prepared. And then you have this outcome, and you have people putting children to bed tonight, and they're afraid of breakfast. They're afraid of, how do I explain this to my children? I have Muslim friends who are texting me tonight saying, should I leave the country? This was a white lash. This was a white lash against a changing country.
When we get to the point where half the country believes Donald Trump committed insurrection, we have arrived at a very serious inflection point in our republic. Soviet Union defector Yuri Bezmenov explains the 4 stages to bring down a country, and we are well on our way.
Ideological subversion is the process which is legitimate, overt, and open. You can see it with your own eyes. All you have to do, all American mass media has to do, is to unplug their bananas from their ears, open up their eyes, and they can see it. There is no mystery. There is nothing to do with espionage. The main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages.
Stage 1. This is scary.
First one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate 1 generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see. Most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information, even if you prove that white is white and black is black. You still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. To get rid society of these people, you need another 20 or 15 years to educate a new generation of patriotically minded, and common sense people.
Stage 2. This is alarming.
The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast.
Stage 3. Are you still listening?
The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis.
Stage 4. Armageddon. As I said, we are well on our way.
To promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not.
You all think you're so woke, so progressive. Do you realize there's a term for you? It's called useful idiots. You're doing exactly what our enemies want, and you can't even see it.
Do you think that General Patton was woke? I don't think so. What do you think, Mike? Mike, was he woke? I don't think so. I don't think he was too woke. He was the exact opposite. You know what woke means? It means you're a loser. Everything woke. Everything woke. It's true. Everything woke turns to shit, okay? It's true. It's true. Look at what's happening.
One of the many reasons the media hates Donald Trump is that he shined a light on just how vicious, nasty, mean-spirited, and one-sided the media are. And this is why trust in the media is at an all-time low. According to an October 2023 Gallup poll, quote, the 32% of Americans who say they trust the mass media a great deal or a fair amount to report the news in a full, fair, and accurate way ties Gallup's lowest historical reading, previously recorded in 2016, end of quote. That's not good. Now, for me personally, this is Exhibit A. When I was running for governor of California in the recall election, one of the columnists for the Los Angeles Times called me, quote, the black face of white supremacy, end of quote. That was a headline of a column. Subheadline, you've been warned.
If you're not gone by the time the sun sets on this valley, all the forces of nature will be unleashed upon you and curse you until the end of your days. You have been warned.
Now, during the campaign, I agreed to submit to an interview with members of the Los Angeles Times editorial board. But before we got into the interview, I had a few things to get off my chest.
Good morning, Larry. Thanks for doing this.
Jim, do you mind if I just say a few things before you get started?
Go ahead, sure.
Thank you. I believe that the coverage of my candidacy by the LA Times has been immensely unfair, grossly unfair. To call me the black face of white supremacy is beyond the pale. You also had another writer who all but called me a black David Duke. I find that enormously, enormously offensive. Your newspaper twice endorsed Barack Obama. There's a picture of Senator Obama standing next to a smiling Louis Farrakhan, who in my opinion is the nation's leading anti-Semite. Alan Dershowitz said, had he seen that photograph, he never would have voted for him. If you ever wrote any article scathing about Barack Obama standing next to Louis Farrakhan, I never saw it. If Larry Elder stood next to David Duke and was smiling, I would dare say you should write a scathing piece about that and should say that I should get out of the race. But I don't see the same kind of thing on the other side. Al Sharpton is a Democrat kingmaker. If you Google Al Sharpton and Democrat kingmaker, you need to stand back. This is the man who, during the Crown Heights riots in 1991, said if the Jews want to pin their yarmulkes on their hat, they can come over to my house and get it on. That's just one of a series of offensive things this man has said over the years, yet he is a Democrat kingmaker. And if your newspaper ever wrote anything denouncing Al Sharpton for those kinds of things, I never saw it. He's in the streets of Ferguson yelling, "No justice, no peace," before one word, Jim, one word of testimony was taken. And as you know, the officer was completely exonerated. So this thing has been completely unfair to me. You have looked at stuff that I've said years ago out of context. I've been on radio for 27 years. Most of my career I was on for 4 hours. That's almost 27,000 hours of radio. I've also been a syndicated column since April of 1998, never missing a week. I think 1 week I took off for Christmas. The LA Times has never published a single article I've ever written. LA Daily News carries my column. Orange County Register carries my column. You guys have never printed a single column that I've read. I published about a half a dozen books, including collections of my columns. 2 of my books were New York Times bestsellers. 2 of them were LA Times bestsellers. You've never reviewed any of my books, even negatively. I did a documentary that came out last year on Juneteenth called Uncle Tom, An Oral History of the Black Conservative. It grossed more money than the 5 films that were nominated for Best Documentary combined, had a higher IMDb rating than any of the ones that was nominated. We hired a consultant to contact a bunch of newspapers, including yours, to try to get somebody to write something about it. You never did. 2 people in your newspaper over the years have written I've written pieces about me. One, a guy named John Mitchell, which I thought was a fair piece. Another one named Patrick Goldstein, who I think is still with the LA Times, also wrote a fair piece. Outside of that, it's been radio-free silence on Larry Elder my entire career, even though I'm from Los Angeles, from the hood, went to public schools, the kind of story you guys love to talk about on Spectrum One, which I get. I get Spectrum One, and on the morning, there'll be somebody somebody from LA who's been an artist, somebody from LA who's a writer, somebody from LA who's a dancer, somebody from LA who's a filmmaker, but you've never, ever, ever interviewed me for any of my stuff, ever. It is completely unfair. I know you don't like my politics. I don't like high taxes. I don't like high regulation. I want to cure borders, all of which you guys are opposed to. You supported, for example, Proposition 16, for crying out loud, to use race again as a factor for college admissions and for hiring and for contracting. And when the voters in 1996, I think it was, voted against that, you guys wanted to restore it. I think it's a racist agenda, a racist bill, and yet you supported that. So calling me the blackface of white supremacy, calling me all but a David Duke, that's the premise here. So I hope this doesn't degenerate into a witch hunt. I hope this really is a friendly or a fair interview with the 2 of you, but I have my suspicions.
Okay, well, I'm glad you got that. We're able to get that off your chest. And I understand that you're not happy with the LA Times coverage.
Well, are you happy with my being called the blackface of white supremacy, Jim? Is that okay with you?
I'm not really here to comment on our last 30 years of coverage of you or our recent.
No, I'm talking about the last week.
Yeah, I'm not really here to represent. Yeah, that's a column by one of our colleagues, and I'm.
What do you think of me being called the blackface of white supremacy, Jim?
You know what? I want to do an interview with you about. You mentioned the John Mitchell profile. What John actually was one of my first colleagues at the LA Times. I enjoyed his profile. The only thing I'll say about that and past coverages, we haven't covered radio much at all in the last 25 years.
I'm also an author and a filmmaker and a columnist. I'm more than just radio.
Okay.
And John Mitchell did not call me the blackface of white supremacy.
Okay.
This happened in the last few days. I'm just asking you, what is your opinion about a columnist that you guys have hired calling Larry Elder the blackface of white supremacy?
Well, what I'm really hoping we can do with this time is talk about, you're saying you want us to give you a fair shot, and we want to ask you about some of your history and your past. But we're trying to give a full view of you now, and we've talked to a lot of people, including some of your friends like Dennis Prager, Stephen Sachs, Miss Stewart, your colleague, and well, you know, Ms. Stewart is from KBC. So we are talking to people who are, you know, some of your biggest fans in doing this profile. So you're not, and what we'd like to do now, we have very limited time, is talk to you about your career in radio and 30 minutes is a short time. So I hope
we're only 9 minutes into the interview. So you're not going to give me an opinion about whether or not you think it is fair or unfair for Larry Elder to be called the blackface of white supremacy.
I'm not going to comment on any of our coverage at the LA Times. I want to start right now afresh with this interview and try to, you know, get some information from you about your career. You just said we aren't paying attention to it, and I'm trying to pay attention to it right now. So can we start?
We can start. Well, that was entertaining. Now, just how much does the Biden administration despise African-American Elon Musk? You know, the owner of a private company.
A question about Twitter. You know, there's a researcher at Stanford who says that this is a critical moment, really, in terms of ensuring that Twitter does not become a vector for misinformation. I mean, are you concerned about the, you know, Elon Musk says there's more and more subscribers coming online. Are you concerned about that? And what tools do you have? Who is it at the White House that is really keeping track of this?
So look, this is something that we're certainly keeping an eye on. And look, we have always been very clear, and that when it comes to social media platforms, it is their responsibility to make sure that when it comes to misinformation, when it comes to the hate that we're seeing, that they take action, that they continue to take action. Again, we're all keeping a close eye on this. We're all monitoring what's currently occurring, and we see it with our own eyes of what you all are reporting, and just for ourselves what's happening on Twitter. But again, social media companies have a responsibility to prevent their platforms from being used by any user to incite violence, especially violence directed at individual communities, as we have been seeing, and the president has been very clear on calling that out. He'll continue to do that, and we're going to continue to monitor the situation.
But when it comes to Apple and how the Chinese use Apple products to suppress their own people, the White House is not monitoring the situation, end of quote. Mum's the word?
This is an interesting situation that has developed with Apple. And I want to start there and get your take on what Apple is doing, because they have restricted, which is what the Chinese government wants, some use of AirDrop ability from iPhone to iPhone, because they're cutting the service down. And this is the way the protesters are communicating with each other. What does the White House, what do you say to Apple about helping the Chinese government to keep their people under control?
Well, look, in general, and we've been clear about this all around the world, we want individual citizens, no matter what government they live under, to be able to communicate freely and openly, transparently and reliably. And we've made that clear with respect to Iran, and we certainly continue to make that clear here with respect to China.
Have you made that clear to Apple?
Apple's a private company, Martha. They have to make decisions, and they have to speak for those decisions. But here at the White House, here in the administration, we want to see that individual citizens, whether they're protesting or not, but in this case, I know that's the context we're talking about, are able to communicate freely and openly.
But why not say something to Apple? Because we were just told the other day that the White House is keeping an eye on Elon Musk and Twitter. So why would you say that from the podium? You didn't say it, but Karine Jean-Pierre said it, and not call Apple out for helping the Chinese government to suppress their own people's ability to communicate?
Again, I think we've been very clear and consistent on this. Certainly publicly, we've been very open about our desires to be able to see citizens communicate. And you know, Apple, if this is a decision that they're making, then they should have to speak to that. But we can't. And we aren't in the business of telling private companies how to execute their initiatives.
Yeah, but Twitter's a private company, too. So why is Twitter getting one treatment and Apple's getting another, is my question.
That is a great question. And the answer?
Well, those are completely two different circumstances. You're talking about the potential. Well, you're talking about the potential for perhaps foreign investment and involvement in the management of Twitter. That's a different issue than what we're talking about here, which is a business decision by Apple with respect to how one of their applications is being utilized.
Certainly
Those
they're
are two
getting
different
influenced
issues.
by a foreign government, and that government is China. And Apple's policies, they've changed policies specifically for China when it comes to what they put on their phones.
Right.
I mean,
And
that
I think-
seems like
and I think
something that
Apple-
the White House ought to be able to keep an eye on.
I certainly think that's a fair question to ask Apple and try to make them communicate why they did this.
But I'm asking, has the White House done that? Have you reached out to them as a matter of national security, since we obviously have national security concerns with China, who they seem to be aiding in this process?
Sure. I don't have any communications to speak to specifically with Apple executives. Again, it's a private company. They make these policies, and they should have to answer for that. What we want to see is that citizens are reliably able to communicate, whether it's a time of crisis or not.
Yeah, but I go back to this same thing, because we were just told that the White House will keep an eye on Twitter because they're concerned about the new Twitter 2.0 that Elon Musk is putting in, where he wants more free speech on Twitter. So they're going to keep an eye on Twitter, and yet you're taking a hands-off approach. You say there's been no communication with Tim Cook at Apple about this process in China with the Chinese government?
Martha, I'm not aware that there's been any conversations specifically with Apple on this particular issue. It's a private company. And as for Twitter, again, Martha, these are apples and oranges. We're talking about potential foreign investment issues, and I have nothing to report in terms of any investigations in that regard. But that was the general concern with respect to Mr. Musk's purchase of Twitter. This is a different issue. This is a policy issue inside of Apple.
They both involve foreign government.
Oh, come on. Yet another double standard. Elon Musk is a clear and present danger because conservative content is no longer being suppressed. It's that simple. It is that frightening.
Hey, you ding-a-ling. Twitter's already an international platform for free speech. You know how I know that? Because no one at Twitter can stop me from tweeting, "Suck it, Elon Musk," in every language.
Elon Musk is a danger to Twitter and to freedom of speech.
Are there any ways to stop him if he wants to buy Twitter? Are there any guardrails around something like this? Because this could be a very dangerous precedent.
There are massive life and globe altering consequences for just letting people run wild.
It's not good for shareholders. It's not good for the stock. It's definitely not good for the country.
Fear not, right-wingers. Another bro-fascist is waiting in the wings to defend your right to spew bile online in the name of free speech. And that is coming up next.
So we were sort of joking with Shauna Thomas, our executive producer, that a lot of people think Elon Musk is sort of like a Bond villain now. That is a very Bond villain move to pull.
You have to look at the theater of it. This is like an old Bond villain. In the days where the richest guy in the world was going to buy up the most important media, political platform in the world. So it has those dramatic underpinnings.
He has been known to say some of the most transphobic and homophobic things to his millions of followers. So creating an arena for hate, to me, that's what that sounds like.
He is building in Tesla a documentedly racist company that perhaps reminds him, gives him nostalgic memories of apartheid South Africa where he grew up.
Sigh. Apartheid South Africa, where he grew up? Is there any white conservative, other than Liz Cheney, that the left does not consider racist?
He cannot be the next president because if he is, all of the things that he attempted to do but was stopped from doing by responsible people around him at the Department of Justice, at the White House counsel's office, all of those things he will do. There will be no guardrails, and everyone has been warned.
You have been warned.
Finally, let me tell you a joke. Guy goes to a bar, sees a guy on the floor, picks him up, puts him on the stool, guy falls back on the floor. Obviously, he's drunk. Says to the bartender, "Where's this man live? I'll take him home." Bartender gives the guy his address. He drags the guy out to the car, opens the door, the guy falls in the street. Puts him in the car, drives the guy home, opens the door, guy falls in the street. Drags him up the guy's stairs, the guy falls all the way down the stairs. Drags him back up the stairs, leans him against the house, pushes the doorbell. Guy's wife comes to the door and says, "Where's his wheelchair?" Now, I know that's a politically incorrect joke, but the guy who told me was a triple amputee. I kid you not. I met him at a food drive for the homeless, and he told one handicap joke after another after another. At first, I didn't want to laugh, but they were so funny. And he said, "Go ahead. You have my permission. You can laugh." I'm tempted to say he could have been a stand-up comic, but that's too obvious. Now, Nina cannot tell a joke to save her life. But she will give it a try if you can get a couple pops in her. So I told her that joke, and then asked her to have a couple of drinks and repeat the joke. She did, but she had to add a few of her own flourishes. Here's what happened.
Okay, I want you to tell it again.
I can't.
Just tell it just one more time, because that was, and you did there was a few more things to it. I think you left out a couple of things, but if you can just remember them, okay?
Baby, I can't do it again.
Yeah, just give it a shot.
Baby, I can't.
So the guy goes into a bar.
Okay, so this guy walks in. We're just walking to a bar. The guy's sitting at the bar, having a few drinks, and the guy gets up and he falls over. He falls over on the floor, and the bartender says, "You can't have any more drinks. Let me call you a cab." And so he calls a cab, and the cab driver is trying to hold the guy up. He keeps falling down. And then he gets him finally into the cab. So he gets him into the cab, and then he drives to his house, and he pulls him out of the cab. He falls down. He pulls him up. He falls down. He finally gets to the door. He's holding him up, and they knock, and she comes to the door, his wife, and she's like, "Where's his wheelchair? Where's his wheelchair?" That's the joke. That's the joke. Oh my God. Stop it.
That was painful. Let's dance it out.
What I gotta do to get you home? My jeans full of guap and they ready for got a Lex Maybach for the sexy grown. Put tone on the rocks that'll make you. Come on, 2 steps, come on, 3 steps, come on. Now that's $3 grand. What you think I'm playing? Baby girl, I'm the man. I did a rubber band.
The show has been brought to you by my friends at YRefi. Invest in America like I do. I'm Larry Elder. We've got a country to save. God bless.